everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at some of the orchids that we have in bloom for the month of August, and we finally moved it back to the end of the month, so this is what's been in bloom for August. If we start off with the beautiful orchid that we see in front of us, this is the Oncidium sotoanum. So the Oncidium sotoanum is actually a parent of the twinkle. It's a species Oncidium that's an extremely vigorous grower and produces these gorgeous bubblegum pink flowers with a beautiful yellow centre. If we take a close-up look of one of the flowers, you can see the beautiful spiky yellow lip. I absolutely adore this, and it's such a prominent feature of the flower. Now, as a parent of the Oncidium twinkle, you might be able to guess this, but it has the most beautiful fragrance, and this is where the twinkle's got its fragrance from mostly. It's like vanilla candy floss. It's really sweet and syrupy and like baked goods almost. Like, there's definitely a vanilla undertone, but it's very, very sweet and sugary. It's absolutely gorgeous and it really fills the room. As mentioned, this is a very vigorous grower, so you can see the lovely plump pseudobulb we've got here on the latest growth, and even though it's flowering, this growth is now producing 2 more growths and has a third eye just at the bottom there active. And we've also got another new growth here which is already producing another new growth, and hopefully this one will produce some flower spikes soon. I don't see any signs yet, but they tend to flower on the more mature pseudobulbs. Free that leaf from all the happy sap. So yeah, it's an extremely vigorous grower. It's probably one of the easiest Oncidiums I have to care for. It readily produces new roots. So I think this is probably one of the most extensive root systems that I have on an Oncidium, considering it barely had any roots when I got it, and it just wants to live. It will chuck out as many roots as you give it the opportunity to, and new growths also. So this is an absolutely gorgeous plant, and I think a must for any collection, as long as you have the space for it, because it's not a small plant. Like the twinkle is a miniature, this one is absolutely huge. And although the flower spikes that it produces aren't that big at the moment for this plant, they can actually be very, very long, much longer than this. This is the first blooming that I've had for this plant, so hopefully it will just continue to get better. Next up, we have the absolutely huge NoID Oncidium intergeneric that I picked up in a garden centre, which is an Inca Orchids orchid. So I checked it out on the Inca Orchids website, and it seems closest to the Miltonidium Bartley Schwartz Highland White that they have on their website. And although I can't find many pictures of the Highland White flowers on the internet, this seems very close to the picture on the Inca Orchids website. So it's a really beautiful flower with yellow edging, a nice white lip, and it's so incredibly fragrant. Now, I'm struggling to actually get this orchid in picture with both flower spikes. If we kind of do a wide shot, you can see just how massive this is. This flower spike is over 100 centimetres. If I were to stake it up, it would not fit on my shelves at all. So I've left it pendant like this, and it can actually fit on my shelves this way. The fragrance is just incredible. It's floral but quite sweet at the same time. But it's just a beautiful fragrance and a beautiful orchid, and it's given me quite the display this summer. So as you can see, it's again quite a sizable orchid. Many Oncidiums are. This is the newest pseudobulb that it produced, and these flower spikes have developed in my care. It did come in bloom, so you have seen this orchid before, but it's just the most gorgeous Oncidium intergeneric with the most beautiful fragrance. If you've got space for it and you see it, I would grab it because it's just a lovely orchid to own. Next up, we have the absolutely gorgeous Nelly. So this is a hybrid between Oncidium and Miltoniopsis. So you can see you inherit the beautiful waterfall-like lip of the Miltoniopsis, but some of the ease of care and vigour of the Oncidium types. Now, I treat this very like a Miltoniopsis. I think it has inherited a lot of the care traits of a Miltoniopsis. We have 2 flower spikes on this particular Nelly, and 1 flower spike starting on the other Nelly as well. Now, the Nelly is a very interesting orchid because the bloom actually changes colour depending on the conditions that it's kept in. So as you can see here, we've got a very bright and vibrant orangey red with lots of red speckling on the white lip and white speckling moving into the petals and sepals here. Now this is because it's been blooming under very warm conditions, and if the buds form during summer, you get a lot more of this speckling effect than if the buds form during winter, where you get a much more solid red colour. Now these ones have decided to bloom for me in summer, and I'm very happy about that. They usually bloom twice a year. You can get more out of them. They'll bloom pretty much whenever they mature a new growth, and often before the new growth is even fully mature. They have the most gorgeous lemony, zesty fragrance. It's just beautiful and it really fills the room. And they inherit this from the Miltoniopsis, so the fragrance is similar to a lot of Miltoniopsis that you'll see. And it's just the most gorgeous orchid. It's one of my absolute favourites. I've actually got 3 Nelly Islas. These 2 are synchronised and blooming together, and the third Nelly Isla is the solid dark red variety, which is called Red Velvet. These ones are the Swiss Beauty varieties. So they are amazing orchids. They can be a little bit tricky to care for until they're established when you first get them, and they just a little bit fussy while they put new roots down, but as soon as you've got a good root system on them, they'll do absolutely fine. I grow them intermediate to warm conditions. My humidity is around 60% usually. They're not particularly fussy in my environment as long as I can keep them moist enough, and they 100% reward you with these gorgeous blooms. They're so floriferous. They'll bloom, they're not fussy at all. They will do their best to bloom whatever the conditions. That's not always a good thing. Sometimes you will need to cut the spikes if they're trying to bloom before fully established. But yeah, they are just lovely, lovely orchids. And as you can see, I've got a lovely huge flower spike on this one, and more to come. I've got another flower spike on this one, more buds to open on this one. So yeah, those are my beautiful Nelly Islas. Next we have the beautiful Miltonia Sunset, which I did feature on my last What's in Bloom video, so I won't go into too much detail about it. I just wanted to show it quickly because it has now opened up all of its buds. And as you can see, the pink that's fading into the petals here, it seems a little bit variable, but it's such a beautiful Miltonia Sunset. I absolutely love it. Another orchid that we've got in bloom for this month is the beautiful Aliceara Tahitian Dancer, which last year it bloomed with much smaller, more sort of mauvey pink flowers, and they're much more kind of deep royal purple this year, and they have a faint fragrance. It's not overpowering, it's slightly honey-ish, but it's not something that you would smell unless you actually got up close and put your nose right up to them. They have this really beautiful yellow contrasting lip, which I just absolutely love, and they're just gorgeous. I really love the Tahitian Dancer. Every time it blooms it makes me happy, just walking in and seeing the yellow and purple contrast. We've got 2 flower spikes this year, and they are kind of spreading in opposite directions. The actual plant itself is quite compact for an Oncidium type, but as you can see the flower spikes are rather huge, and they tend to cluster quite a lot of flowers towards the end of the spike rather than having an even display all the way up the spike, or at least that's been my observation. This is a plant that I've only had in my care for about a year, so it could well change as it becomes a more mature specimen and is kind of more fully adapted to my environment, but it's a plant that I've kind of stressed before by putting it into semi-hydro with leca, and it's on the road to recovery at the moment. And if we look at the plant itself, you can see that it's got really nice big plump pseudobulbs, and I absolutely love the pseudobulbs of the Tahitian Dancer. If we look on the root system there, you can see that it is definitely on the road to recovery and self-watering with sphagnum. It really appreciates quite a lot of moisture, and it did not enjoy leca at all. It yellowed pretty much as soon as it went into leca, which then came back as soon as it went into moss. So I think the drier environment meant that nutrients weren't as accessible to it because I was pHing correctly. So in theory, the nutrients shouldn't have been a problem, but in practice, the yellowing leaves kind of mean that it obviously was a problem. So that's the Aliceara Tahitian Dancer, which is a beautiful orchid, and if you're into Oncidiums and Oncidium intergenerics, I definitely recommend adding it to your collection. Next up we have the Lepanthes telipogoniflora, which is a really cute little miniature. It's a really beautiful orange miniature with a really lovely little red lip, which is so tiny you can barely see it. And I have no idea which are the petals and which are the sepals for this flower, because they seem to be fused. But it's so tiny, like the flower is the size of the whole plant, and the whole plant is probably smaller than a fingertip. So this one's living in my terrarium, and it's just a really beautiful little miniature. It seems to be really easy to bloom. I just mist it down every few days, and it's doing really well, as you can see. Next I wanted to show you some of the Phalaenopsis that I've got in bloom for August. So we'll start off with the complex hybrid Phalaenopsis. This is a NoID Peloric Phalaenopsis that I picked up discounted in a garden centre, and it was £1, and I actually wanted the ceramic pot that it came in. It didn't have any flowers at the time, so I bought it really for the ceramic pot to use for my Masdevallias, because the ceramic pot on its own would have been like £5. So I decided to get it. And I couldn't possibly have thrown the orchid away, so I recovered it, and it's produced these peloric blooms for me, which I'm not the hugest fan of this type of Peloria trait, I'll be honest with you, because it's quite closed off, the way the petals are mimicking the lip here. But it's produced a really beautiful cascading display. I have this up on one of my higher shelves, and it does catch my eye whenever I walk in the room. So I'm quite happy to keep it in my collection. It's something a little bit unusual, and it's not to everyone's tastes, but I do quite enjoy the display that it's produced and how pendant this spike is. Even if it's not my favourite type of flowering or my favourite shape, it still adds something, I think, to my room. So for now I will keep it. If I eventually decide that I really don't like the shape of it, then I can always give it away, but it's an extremely vigorous grower, and while it's rewarding me with beautiful cascading spikes like this, it's earning its place in my grow room, in my opinion. Another Phalaenopsis that we have in bloom this month is the complex hybrid Phalaenopsis that I bought from a garden centre, and looks very similar to the Phalaenopsis Baldans kaleidoscope, or at least a colour variation of it. Now there seems to be quite a lot of variation within the Baldans kaleidoscopes that I've seen. I do have another variety which is a much paler with more prominent pink markings, which also looks like a variety of Baldans kaleidoscope. So I think there is some diversity within the colour forms of this and the variations of this particular hybrid, but it's a really beautiful hybrid and blooms very reliably for me multiple times a year. As you can see, it's blooming in the middle of summer. It's not been triggered by a cooler temperature drop. It's just a really beautiful, vigorous hybrid. It's quite a big hybrid, as you can see. It's the plant itself. It's got a lot of very big aerial roots coming off it, and it's kind of needing a repot soon, I think, actually. But yeah, that's my Phalaenopsis Baldans kaleidoscope, and I've left the blooms on this as kind of a natural flower spike. I kind of rotated the plant as it was growing to just give it this arching flower spike, and I quite like that. I think I prefer this to the staked flower spikes. It's not always possible to achieve this shape though, so quite often I do need to stake it, but this time it's formed quite a nice symmetrical bloom. It's the other side of it. So yeah, it's formed a very nice symmetrical bloom, and you can see they're all kind of facing in a similar direction, so you can see all of the blooms from both angles. So that's the Phalaenopsis Baldans kaleidoscope. So those were the only two complex hybrid Phalaenopsis that I have in bloom at the moment. So we're kind of moving on to the more species Phalaenopsis now. So this is the Phalaenopsis Super Stupid Carmela F1 crossed with Phalaenopsis Gigantea Big Boy. So as you can see, it's got really beautiful glossy round leaves. It's starting another leaf at the moment. It's got 3 flowers on this spike, and it's also 4 flowers on this spike, and as you can see they're very large and they're also very waxy. Just pop a light onto these so you can kind of see how waxy they are. They're really beautiful, sturdy flowers and long lasting. Unfortunately, I didn't detect any fragrance from these. The Gigantea, I believe, is supposed to be fragrant, but the Gigantea I do have, and it's much slower growing. So if you want a kind of hybrid that's very vigorous and much faster growing, this is a really nice hybrid. It's not fragrant, unfortunately, but it's just a really beautiful. I love pink spotted flowers. Pink and white spots are my weakness with flowers of any kind. And this one is growing quite rapidly, actually. It's got put a nice root system down since I bought it. Next up, we have some of my more compact and closer to species hybrids, which are the summer blooming Phalaenopsis hybrids that I have. So many of these are kind of hybridized with the Polycylus subgenus, so variations of Phalaenopsis bellina and violacea, but I've also got a few other hybrids in here. So this is my Phalaenopsis violacea alba, which I have shown you before, so I won't go into too much detail, but it's opened up 2 more new buds. They're sequential bloomers, so it'll keep going all through summer. It probably will finish soon because the temperatures are starting to cool down now. But yeah, these are the 2 flowers that we've got open at the moment. Beautiful smell of cinnamon, and I absolutely just love the closer to species hybrids with the waxy flowers and the interesting fragrances. I just think they're so much more exciting than some of the complex hybrid phals, although they do have their own special place in my heart. And this one's just recently opened, so it's actually not quite fully open yet, but I'm not 100% sure whether it is going to open up more or whether it's going to stay more of a kind of cupped flower. So this is the Phalaenopsis Zheng Min Pixels that I got in my Orchids Deluxe haul, which did have a spike when I got it, but it started buds and then it's opened up. It's got 1 flower at the moment, but it does have another bud on the way behind there. So it's a really beautiful kind of yellow tipped, and then it's got a more orangey, feeding into almost brown actually at the tips here, like a really bronzed effect. And it's kind of a yellow tip on the top there. It's got a little bit of freckling as well in the flower, which I really love. It's such a beautiful little hybrid. It's very different to the variety picture that was on screen, but obviously it's a seedling, so there is a lot of seedling variation. If I'd wanted the one that was shown, I probably would have had to get one of the clones, but they didn't have any. So yeah, you take your chances whenever you get a seedling, and it's a beautiful, beautiful flower. I really love it. I really love how orange and bronze and yellow kind of fade together in it, and the beautiful kind of pink nose that it has in the centre there. It's really, really cute. I love it. It's a very small plant, but it's flowering size. So yeah, that one's doing very well at least. Next up, we have the Phalaenopsis Samera again. So it's currently got 2 blooms. You can see that one is actually fading though. The stalk kind of goes more yellow when they start to fade, and the actual bloom does look quite different. So this one's probably going to drop fairly soon. But we've got this one which has just opened, and it's working on another bud there. So the display will keep going for a little bit longer, yeah. I've not actually had more than 2 blooms at once on this so far. It seems that 2's kind of the maximum it can achieve at the moment, but it's such a beautiful bloom and such a soft kind of floral cinnamony scent. I absolutely love the Samera. It's one of my favourite hybrids. Next up, we have the Phalaenopsis Shingher Pure Love, which is a hybrid of the violacea, which has a really, really intense fragrance, which is probably even more intense than the violacea. You can see the first bud that I showed you in my Phalaenopsis video is just starting to fade, but we've got another bud that's just opened, and it's actually swelling another bud here as well. So it's quite a bit bigger than my other summer blooming phals, but I love it. It's got a really, really intense fragrance and really intense colour pigmentation in the flowers there. Really shiny, waxy flowers. This, once again, is my Phalaenopsis KS Happy Eagle crossed with Princess Kaiulani. And it's such a beautiful hybrid, just almost metallic flowers. I absolutely love the shape of the flowers here. And just kind of glistens when the light hits it. It's got a really metallic kind of shiny texture to the flowers, so thick. You can see how thick and waxy the flowers are, and it's lasting really well. So absolutely beautiful hybrid. I just love it. You can see that we've got another bud about to open up here. There's not too much of a fragrance, very slight kind of citrusy scent, but not anything overpowering at all, nothing that I can really notice unless I stick my nose right in there. And last but not least, we have a little bit of an awkward blooming from the Phalaenopsis Yaphon sensation here, which the bud actually opened upside down. But it's a really, really intense, glorious magenta colour which kind of then has yellow tips to the flowers, and you can see kind of how glistening the flowers are under the lighting. It's a really beautiful hybrid. Again, I can't really detect too much fragrance from it. It's kind of a very, very slight hint of maybe citrusy, similar to the Phalaenopsis Leodoro, but definitely nothing particularly intense or that you would notice walking into the room. So it's a really kind of deep purple. It's very difficult to capture on camera. I've just got the light kind of shining directly on it to try and show you the colour a little bit better. Obviously it is upside down, which is a little bit awkward. Just try and manoeuvre it so it's a little bit more in a normal configuration without breaking it. Yeah, bit of an awkward one. We've got some more buds coming though, so maybe we'll get a better display before the end of the summer. So that is a kind of rundown of everything that's been in bloom for the month of August so far, particularly with my Phalaenopsis hybrids actually. So I hope you enjoyed this quick roundup of what's been in bloom. If you did, then give this video a like or subscribe to my channel for more regular orchid updates, and I will see you guys later. Bye!